Mike McCool here in the Royal Examiner Studio, and with me today, Delores Oates. Delores is our delegate, which we're now in the 31st district, and you've had a lot of stuff to do the last year or two. Delores has served on the Board of Supervisors. 2 terms or 1 term?
1 term.
It seems like 2.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks felt like it was 2 terms.
And it kind of surprised me because that's trying to do that in the Board of Supervisors, and you had the courage to move on as a delegate, and you've done a great job. So tell us from Delores' point of view, like, what did you expect? Like day one, you were down there and you had your bright red coat on, and so, like, were you lost? I mean, this kind of like, it's daunting, I would think.
So, I spoke to a high school group this morning, and I talked about and Virginia's impact on this entire government. So Virginia is what formed the bicameral government that we now enjoy at the federal level. And so the House of Delegates was originally the House of Burgesses.
Right.
And when you walk in, Thomas Jefferson designed the Capitol. And you cannot, there's no way that it was chilling. I mean, you just walk in and you think about what has happened historically in that building,
right,
and the legacy that you are now carrying for the founders of not only Virginia but this nation.
Right.
So I have to say it was daunting.
I'm getting chilled just thinking.
I was awestruck.
Yes.
And so for a moment I kept thinking, are they going to come and tell me that they made a mistake and take me out of here? Because, there's no way that you can measure up to what has been done before you. So you just have to, now I'm there to protect Virginia's founding principles.
Well, we appreciate it because we know you're going to do a great job on that. So did they give you a class of like how the things work and instruct you? Because there's a process. You just don't say, oh, let's do this,
You are correct. So in December, well, actually, as soon as we were elected, we were given an invitation by the clerk of the House of Delegates, who, by the way, is a phenomenal administrator. And this is the largest class of freshmen since Reconstruction. There were 34 new delegates. So he had his hands full in trying to get all of us through orientation. So we had a 3-day orientation period, and it was very quick. It was rapid fire, if you will, but you had tons and tons of information on a laptop. And you had to review all the policies, the procedures, the decorum expectations, because there is decorum. Robert's rules are not used in the House of Delegates. It's actually Jeffersonian rules, and so that's a little different. And, the number of times you hear the bill is very different from local government. So we learned a lot of the procedural and operational aspects of serving.
And how to draft a bill. Yeah.
Absolutely. How to draft a bill.
Have you done that yet?
I have.
Well, tell us about it.
So, it's really not as complicated for our side as we thought it would be.
Right.
I have a legislative aide who helps me with all of these activities. But basically, we have a group in the legislature that operates as a nonpartisan organization. And what they do is they take your ideas and they create bills from your ideas. Or they can go back and take current law and change that law at your request. And then they send you an example of what they've stricken from the code, or a whole new bill in some cases, and you review that before you hit the send button, which gets listed under your name online. Right. So you're very careful to make sure it's accurate before you hit the send button.
Well, I think I just told you, I see where the governor has signed, 100 bills here and 100 bills there. So you mentioned how many bills are presented every year? So
there were thousands of bills presented, but not all of them get a hearing. So the bills are presented. A lot of them are determined, I guess, to be heard by committee chairs. And then they are sent to committee. So you will get notified a couple of days prior that your bill is being heard by the committee that is hearing it, and sometimes multiple committees hear your bills, because it can start in rules and then go over to Health and Human Services, or vice versa. So we we would get notification a couple days that we were expected to present our bill, and it's usually at 7:30 or earlier in the morning. So you have to be kind of an early person to serve in the Virginia Legislature. And then we would, put together our testimony. People came and testified, to support the bill or against the bill. And I had local folks. I put forth a vaping bill because vaping is an issue in our schools. Yes. It's a horrible issue. So one of the bills I sponsored, I put forth was to, at this point in the code, it was only $100 fine for you to sell a vape to a minor. That was all you would get. So I sponsored a bill that would increase those fines significantly. In fact, it started at $500 and then was $1,000 and then moved up to $1,500. And so I presented that bill, and it was to the courts, which is a very difficult committee to present a bill to, because you're talking about law and lawyers and people who are interpreting what your bill says. But this was pretty straightforward. So I presented that. That was my first bill that I presented. Yeah, I was shaken.
That's hard to believe that you would shake, Delores, because you're pretty bold.
I am bold, but I will tell you, it's quite intimidating to present your first time because you're not, you're not accustomed to the environment, and you've got cameras at every angle.
Am I doing this right, or am I going to look like a fool?
Exactly. But I have a great staff, and they prepared me well.
That's one thing too. I don't think people realize. You're not doing this by yourself.
No.
You have a lot of them are career. People have been there a long time, and they kind of move around with the people, I guess.
They do.
It's fascinating work, but like you say, it's just amazing. I remember one time we had the sales tax people came in, and they do an audit periodically, and he says he was explaining some of the laws. He said, "Well, look at this law here. There's only 6 people in the state that this law affects, but there's a law in the books for these 6 people because they belong to some Indian tribe, and there's only 6 of them, but there's a sales tax code for that." And probably some of these laws that we see that we don't ever hear about because they affect so few people. Probably.
Correct. There are a lot of things that are brought forward that are local issues that have impacted local municipalities that won't necessarily impact us. But where you have to keep your guard up is those local issues could impact you, unintended consequences of some of these bills.
Yeah.
And that was something that I learned this session, is that a lot of these bills have a long history. And you have to go back and determine what that history is in order to find out what's the real motive for this bill. Because these bills can get represented year after year.
Right. I see that a lot where I read through the book. Explain one thing to me about the bills. You have the Senate and you have the delegates. And a lot of times you'll see identical bills come through. What's the process on that? How it all gets mixed together? Because sometimes you'll say, well, the governor signed the Senate bill or he signed the House bill. But, they marry together. Explain that.
So there are times when you will want to go get a Senate companion to carry an exact bill so that when it comes time for bills to pass, you already have consensus in both houses. So that is just a matter of streamlining legislation. But what you'll see is some of the bills have gotten passed as Senate bills and some have gotten passed as House bills. And so, but the Senate votes on them ultimately, and so does the House. So we, at crossover.
Yes, that's right. I remember that word.
Right. Crossover is when you no longer have new bills presented, but you start hearing the other body's bills.
Right. Because we have a very limited time that you come together.
60 days in the first session and 45 in the second.
And I understand we have a balanced budget.
Correct. There's a constitutional amendment in the state of Virginia.
We have to balance our budget.
We need that at the federal level.
Yes. I think we have it at the local level, but it's very difficult, you've done several budgets when you were on the Board of Supervisors. It's a very contentious times that we get into. So if you have to narrow it down to one thing you've learned, where would you put your aha moment or something? I don't know how to describe it, but somewhere you walked away thinking what?
So the one thing that I think that impacted me the most is what I've learned is that you have to be patient. And
that's hard for you,
and
Delores.
you have to play chess.
Yes.
Not checkers.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're not trying to get a king. You are trying to play chess and go slowly and
Not
methodically.
lose all your men, right?
Exactly. So you have to really think about how to get your legislative priorities through, sometimes not directly, but indirectly. And so, and that has been the biggest learning experience for me. And so I have a lot that I'm working on right now to take back next year.
Yeah, because you always hear that in the campaign mode, oh, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to fight for this, and when you get there, you realize I don't have all the information, or I didn't know it worked that way, or you found that out on the Board of Supervisors at the same.
Absolutely.
And then it's even multiplied 100 times.
There's always more to the story.
Oh, there's always more. And then, and like you said, that backstory is the trick. Is sometimes, well, again, they're thinking all the time. Okay, you've turned it down 10 times. Well, we're going to come through the kitchen door, and we're going to come through the basement.
Absolutely.
Work it out.
One of the other things that I did is I went to the local elected officials and talked to a lot of the people about what they wanted to see us try to pass in Richmond that would make their jobs better and serve the people in a better way. Right. So we got legislative priorities from Clark County. We worked with Warren County and Frederick County and even the schools. Right. And so what can we do to help you benefit our constituents in a much more efficient way? And so a lot of the ideas come from there.
Right. I flashed in my brain, Dillon Rule. You want to explain that?
I explain the Dillon Rule. So the Dillon Rule is that you have to say "Mother, may I" to Richmond before you can.
They got their thumb on it, right? It's kind of.
Yeah, anything that isn't expressly permitted by the legislature in Richmond cannot be done at the local level.
Yeah, because sometimes we say, "Well, why can't they do that?"
You can't. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
You have to change Richmond in some cases in order to accomplish your local priorities.
I can only remember I think when you were on the Board of Supervisors or maybe before, when the town wanted to do something and they couldn't do it because of the Dillon Rule. So they got our 3 delegates together and
they formed their own economic development authority.
Well, they did, but then what came back isn't what they asked for. And the answer was, well, we just thought this would be better. And I thought, sometimes be careful what you ask for.
Right, you might get it.
You might get it, or you might not. You get what they want to give you, But it's an interesting process, and you're well suited for it, Delores.
Well, thank you, Mike.
I think you've gone through a lot, but I just think it's a lot of work.
It is, and I have a lot of energy, and you have to because the days are very long. So I would get into our office between 6:30 and 7 a.m. most days. You can go to early caucus meetings. There's military caucuses of which I'm a member. I attended that every week. There's the rural caucus where you're looking out for rural issues, and I attended that caucus. So you can be at the House assembly by 6:30. Most people are. Yeah. And then you get back to your room at 9 p.m.
I was going
to
say,
later.
you work more than half days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's no part-time employment in the when session is.
And you work how many days a week?
Is convened. We work 7 days a week most times. I would come home on Friday afternoons, do my laundry, and go back on Sunday. But
I was going to say, no, you've explained. I'm just curious. So you go down there for 60 days. Where do you stay? I mean, what's the process? I'm sure they have people that rent things just to delegates.
They do. So this year I stayed at a long-term hotel, but you can get an Airbnb. You can rent apartments. Some people do for that duration, but they know when session is coming, and so when it convenes, they're excited because it's a big impact to the economics downtown Richmond.
I can remember talking to Ben Klein and. I can't think who it is now, but they were roommates when they were both delegates. They all get together and rented a place and got together. But yeah, it's a whole other world.
It is. It's a whole, and it's amazing what occurs in that short period of time. So you mentioned the number of bills. So there were 1,000. Like about 1,020 bills passed. I'm averaging, or I think around that number that the governor will consider. And so think about that. You did that in 60 days.
Okay, now you're going to take a little break, and we're going to go back next week for 45 days. What happens in that 45-day period?
So next year, we have a biennial budget. So next year you have the shortened time frame. And so there'll be a smaller number of bills that you're allowed to put forward because there's such a short window. And then the biennial budget is passed on 2-year increments in Virginia. So next year, you will be able to amend the budget or change the budget. But for the most part, you have a starting point because the budget that gets passed this year will be for next year as well. So they do 2-year budgets.
When you go back next week, you're not going to be introducing new bills.
No.
So that's just like cleanup.
No, next week is a 1 day.
It's only one day.
It's only 1 day, typically, unless there's a reason to stay longer, which could happen.
It does happen, yes.
Yes, it has. But only next Wednesday, we will go in. It's a 1-day session. It's called Reconvene, and we'll consider the amendments the governor's made to bills. And then also there'll be a discussion on vetoes and that sort of thing. And then we'll try to come to some conclusion on the budget.
Okay. Now, sometimes I've heard there's sessions in August. Was that last year? Or can't the governor call back a
He
session?
can call special session in
maybe
the
that's what it
event
was.
there's a requirement to do so.
So what do you do in the off season?
Oh my goodness. Well, we still work a lot. So what our job requires is that we take care of our constituents. So if we have constituent issues at any level, but primarily at the state level, then we help direct our citizens to find solutions to those issues. One of the examples is a couple of our veterans were overpaid during COVID, and now they want their money back.
They want it now.
Yes. And so we've helped resolve some of those types of issues. We had somebody who just misspelled their name on a form, but you know what that's like.
Once it's in the computer, you can't get it changed, I know.
So we're working to help, and I have a legislative aide, Emily Wendell, who's phenomenal, and she basically takes care. We get thousands of emails. She responds to them. She cares for our constituents. She helps find solutions. She maintains my schedule. She tells me, which meetings I need to attend.
What do I got to do now?
Exactly.
Like you said, I can remember, and I tell people all the time, take advantage of your representatives, either on the state level or the federal level, because I've used Congressman Klein on some issues that another agency would just, they hassle you to death over nothing. And I said, well, I need some straight answers. And they jumped right in, was able to resolve the situations for me. And I tell people they're there. That's what they do. They're your representative, and if they can help you, they will. And
absolutely.
So,
I carried a couple of budget amendments this year for historical interest and in Clark County, and we were able to pass those. We were able to get those through so far. So things like that are important. If you have an expansion or we carried the Burwell Morgan Mill budget amendment. The mill operates off of the water coming from a dam, but the dam is eroding, and it had to be repaired.
Sure.
And it was an emergency. So we helped carry a bill that got some funds directed in order to save and preserve the history that is so important to Clark County. Yeah.
Yeah. I think isn't Virginia called the mother of presidents?
Absolutely.
And we don't really, and also even in the federal elections, Virginia is a state that really is critical on electing our next president.
We're critical to most everything in the country. Virginia's been a leader from the beginning, so we want to maintain that presence, and we want to lead and not follow.
Well, we appreciate that. We do want to thank you for all the hard work, and I know that I've said it's harder than people realize. And we hope, and this is every 2 years election?
Yeah, so it is.
You're back in campaign mode.
Exactly. So the House of Delegates is very similar to House of Representatives, and we have 2-year terms.
Yeah.
So I will be running for re-election.
Are you going to run for re-election after the first year you decided, I can do this?
I think I'm going to run. You got to run for at least 2 terms to get anything done.
I think so. Well, that's what they say. I think you're well suited for it. You got the energy, and that's what it takes. And you got a little smarts up there. And I got to give the disclaimer. She used to work for me. We were talking about how long ago it was, but that really dates you.
The 1990s. I worked for Mike. I did. I worked for you.
I just can't believe. I see people on the street and they say, "Oh, I used to work for." You did?
Yeah.
And I was looking to the list and I thought, when I say the number, it sounds like we've really churned through a lot of people, but like 250 people have come through the doors over the last almost 50 years, and it's just hard to believe.
Well, just think about how many employees you've served.
Well, but you know how many people that have businesses in town all used to work for me, and we've got them started. And I've never really, I want that. I want people to go out on their own and have that American dream, and I'll help anyone to make that happen. And
that's wonderful. I am very passionate about young people and the entrepreneurial
Sure.
spirit, and encouraging them not just to consider college, but to consider
Sure.
starting a business,
Sure.
to following their passions and pursuing those things. That's important to me. And so I've spent a lot of time at the local schools. I have meetings scheduled at schools for the next several weeks before school closes.
Sometimes people are afraid to go out and do something because they'll fail. And I explain to people, you don't learn from successes.
Right.
You learn from failures.
Absolutely.
And so, you know what they say, just keep failing because eventually you'll figure it out.
Well, what is it? I guess Abraham Lincoln ran for office
Tons
of times before he got elected president. So think about that.
And he didn't even campaign for it.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It is amazing. The world is great, and we thank people like you and all our delegates on both sides of the aisle because they all do work hard, and I think they're all passionate about what they're doing for their local area.
Well, I love Virginia dearly. I love this community dearly, and it's really my honor to serve the people here.
We appreciate that, and we hope you have another good 2 years. So campaign starts soon.
Yep, next year.
Thanks again, Dolores. I really
Thanks,
appreciate
Mike.
you coming. Come in. You do send out a newsletter. She does send out a newsletter. If you want to keep abreast, they can go to your website and sign up, right?
Yep,
and
DoloresForDelegate.com.
And you can get her ongoing newsletter that Emily, is it Emily?
Emily Wendell.
Emily, she sends out, and she'll put you on the list. Because it's interesting, I get that thing, and I said, well, I got to tell people about that. So I'm going to have Dolores, I want to, bend her ear to send us more of this stuff so we can keep you posted on what's going on in Richmond or around our community as well. So it's great.
Well, communication is key to being involved, and I want our local constituents involved in their government.
I was going to bring the camera. Mark and I were going to go to Richmond. And I said, we're going to go down to Richmond to see Dolores, on her first day. But I thought, you'd be too busy.
I would love that. That would have been fun.
So maybe we'll do that next time.
Absolutely.
We'll come to Richmond.
Come to Richmond.
And you can give us the 3-cent tour.
You can even title it Mike Goes to Richmond.
That's right.
I love it.
Maybe. We'll do something.
That would be fun.
It is a lot of fun, isn't it? All right.
Yep.
Thanks again, Dolores.
Thanks,
and
Mike.
we'll see you soon, okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you.